My notes say that you've been around for 20 years.
I know, I can't believe it. So yeah, so we started in October of 2000. And I love the word that you said, passion, because I'm definitely still passionate about the work that I do. And that I came across someone that go, Elaine, the word passion comes from the word passos, which means to suffer. I go, oh my gosh, that is so true. But also, it's also such a driving force, right? When you had your restaurant, I imagine that you had a vision of what you wanted to serve and how you wanted to do it. And the same thing with me, 20 years ago, I had a vision, and it's kind of, it seems lofty now, but it was about bringing something to the world and making it simple and accessible. And I was doing so much research, going to so many conferences, and really in the ivory tower where people would talk about neuroscience and the mind body connection. Sometimes I needed a dictionary to understand what they were talking about. The executive director of the Trauma Resource Institute that I founded says, Elaine, your superpower is taking complex subjects and making them simple. And I think I do have a talent of doing that. But I think it started with this kind of passion and a mission to do something differently outside the box. And when you say entrepreneurial, I remember a number of years back, someone said, well, Elaine, you realize you're a social entrepreneur. You've seen something that needs to be different and changed, and you've brought new ideas. And I'm really happy to say it's been 20 years. When I first started, I mean, honestly, Chuck, if you would have told me that something I created was in
Hmm.
like 75 plus countries and 50 states, I'd say, well, and maybe I'm also talking to Jesus on a regular basis, and I'm in a mental hospital right now because I'm delusional, right? But I think that it happened from hard work, passion, commitment, but it also happened, you got to be tough. And that was running your restaurant, right? I mean, there are people that sometimes from the most unlikely places can be kind of spiteful and
Hmm.
not very kind. And so I look at myself as a kind person, but I'm also pretty tough. And yet I had to be in order to do what I'm doing. And that doesn't mean it hasn't come with suffering. I often say to people, I go, well, I know I look really sturdy, but I'm covering up a lot of battle wounds in terms of coming forward with it. Because really, I mean, I remember the moment I'm saying, a nonprofit is a business, right?
Yeah, you
Duh.
got to have revenue in a
Yeah,
nonprofit. Somebody's
duh.
got to pay the bills.
Right. But if you have let's say, I don't know if you felt this way. I got a passion for cooking. I got a passion for healing people. And then you're going, I'm going to do this. And you're going, oh, wait a second. I have to have board insurance. I have to have a board. I have to, um, I have to have a revenue. I have to have, hopefully, eventually employees. We didn't have employees in the beginning because I didn't get paid unless we got some kind of revenue in. And I was doing everything for free in the beginning because it was an idea that didn't have what we call in the psychology field, we were not evidence based. We didn't have our randomized controlled trials to say that it worked. But I honestly, I mean, I don't know if you did this with your business. I knocked on doors. I can still
Hmm.
remember a friend of mine saying, I want to take you to this deputy director of a county that has a large mental health system. And so you would tell him, Elaine, about what you do. And I go, okay, I'm there. So I didn't have any trouble doing that. You can see I'm a little bit of a talker. So I got in there and I told him what it was. He goes, that sounds interesting. And then my friend who was a psychologist says, show him the skills, Elaine. So I showed him these simple skills so he could experience them. And he goes,
Hmm.
I feel lighter. I feel kind of better inside my body. What did you just do? That's kind of like magic. I said, no, you didn't. I didn't do it. You did it. I just brought your attention to your sensations of well being and invited you to really pay attention to them because they usually grow. And that's about like gardens, right? You know about
Hmm.
gardens being a owner of a restaurant. What if you only watered the weeds of a garden? They would
Right.
they would grow and flourish. But guess what? If you say, well, I'm going to shift my attention and I'm going to water those vegetables and the flowers, if they flourish, and that's our well-being, what's inside of us. And those are the simple ways I would talk to people about it. And I can use that metaphor whether I'm sitting in a hut in Haiti or I'm sitting in a conference room in Oxford, England, and I can
Right.
talk about the nervous system and how we are designed in the same way all over the world. I think that my mission and purpose, I think, caught on to people. People were interested in that. But I think when you say about what sustains a business and when you think of something differently or being entrepreneurial, and I wasn't the first one to have this idea, but as I'm traveling to all these countries after horrible disasters, there would never be ever enough therapists, psychologists, social workers, like we have in the States, never. But there would always be like some wise person, like the woman who lived at the end of her block, who everybody would go to when they were in crisis. And I said, what if you equip those people with skills that are based on neuroscience, cutting edge neuroscience, and you made them simple and accessible, that they could share them for themselves and for their community? And that was really the spark that really started changing things up. So I haven't been to those 75 countries, but I've trained natural leaders in those countries who then have taken it and have spread it, scaled it to their communities. And that's when, oh my gosh, I mean, again, I had no idea that it would happen the way that it did when I first had the ideas of it. But it really came from paying attention, being flexible, sometimes changing a course that you thought you were going to go on and saying, well, that didn't work so well. Because I think you have to be adaptable when you are a business person and
Right.
say, maybe we do it differently. It also meant having hard conversations with people. And there are people that, if you got a group of people together, there's some that love me and there's some that don't like me so much because I might have said something to them in a way that I felt very passionate about that they didn't agree with. So
Right.
those people may have left. And I've had people that have left the organization and they've actually almost completely stolen what I've created and just put a different name on it. Now, I haven't gone out after them. I just feel, well, there's plenty of trauma in the world, but there's a cost to being an outspoken person. But I
Yeah.
think you almost have to be if you're starting something that's new, because you're going to have forces against you that are going to say to you, it's not going to work. This will never happen. How could you even imagine that? And I know more than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I can say this, and I have so many men in my life, including my own husband and my son, who I so appreciate. But I imagine, maybe Ariana knows this, is that we still live in a patriarchal world.
Yeah.
And so you as a man can go spaces and you'll be paid attention to in a different way than I will. And not in every space, but in many spaces. So I think that women sometimes have a little bit more struggle that they sometimes have to traverse in order to get their points across. So, I mean, I actually been very deliberate about it. If I knew, for example, I was going to be talking to a group of people that I knew were primarily men, and not to say I can't talk to them and I would go and talk to them as I'm talking to you right now, but I would bring somebody that I trusted, a man, with me and say, I would love to invite you to come with me. We'll share the space. And so then some people can hear me better and hear the mission better when it's a person who's of a different gender. But that's also culturally too. So if I'm going to go to, for example, and this just happened, we're doing some work in Palestine, and I want to know everything I need to know. They're suffering greatly, and my organization's not political. If people come to us and say we're suffering, I'll say, well, how can we help you with this model, heal? And so I've learned a lot about how we in the West might approach something that may not sit well with people that feel they are experiencing a genocide. And there are
Right.
people that if we could have a conversation with a number of people say, that's not a genocide. But I
Well, there's
listen.
people suffering.
There's people suffering.
There's people
Exactly.
suffering that don't necessarily need to. They don't deserve it.
They don't deserve it. And I could say that about Ukraine. And here you said you were a service member, and I'm going to thank you for your service. But, I work with Ukrainians, and I now have dear friends that are Ukrainians, and they are suffering so much. I had the great honor to be invited to Kharkiv in 2019. And I didn't know then that it was going to change the trajectory of my life, because I'm happy to say, like, my book is in the process of being translated. It's actually already been translated into Ukrainian and will be published in Ukraine. But I guess what I'm saying about that in terms of what you said, the purpose of your podcast is I also had to pay attention to the wins, that things that I can remember when I was asked to go to Ukraine. This wonderful man named Dr. Alexander Elkin had seen me at a conference in India, and he said, Elaine, I'd love to bring you to Ukraine. I said, oh, Alexander, I've just traveled so much this year. I don't think that's going to be possible. And so he was like a dog with a bone. I heard you dogs in the background. And he just said, no, you need to come. And he knew something that I didn't know. So making a long story short, even though I had traveled like 120,000 miles that year, I got on a plane to Ukraine, went to Ukraine, and met some of the dearest friends of my life there. I needed to go there. But it's like paying attention to the signs that come, it's like signs happen. But if you don't, what's the interpretation of the signs? Have you ever had a gut feeling about something
Oh, yeah.
and did the opposite and then got bitten and where? Yes, it's that. So I think that, the leaders that I talk to, I think they start trusting their gut. Because when I haven't is oftentimes when I've gone down the wrong course. But if I listen to the signs that, okay, this is adaptable. I can do that. I can go to Ukraine, even though it's going to be difficult for me. But there's obviously a really, I guess a higher purpose in terms
Hmm.
of maybe me going that I don't even understand. And I can say that unequivocally right now because we have so many community resiliency model teachers in Ukraine now.
Hmm.
I just sent one of my staff members who traveled to Ukraine to teach therapists in Ukraine the model that we know really helps with trauma. But if I hadn't made that trip way back then, if Alexander wasn't the dog with the bone, all
Hmm.
this would not have happened. So I think part of being a leader is paying attention to the signs and knowing what to do and what not to do, if that makes sense to you.
Right. Yeah, totally. And it's something that's very interesting to me because, having been in the military, I have a lot of friends who, all kinds of problems after leaving there from, alcohol and drugs to suicide and, everything in between. Right. So, yeah, kind of, that's kind of something that, how do you deal with those traumas and how do people move past them and not keep compounding injury on top of injury till they get to a place that's, you can't come back from.
I mean, I think those are the very important questions. And I've worked a lot with veterans. I've worked a lot of people who are still in the military. And I mean, that's some of the work I did in the very beginning of starting Try was meeting people in the military and wanting to help because it was during that whole Iraq war period that
Hmm.
so many people were coming back suffering. And every time I would hear about a service member self-harming or harming others, I'd say that is undigested trauma. How can we help them, right? So, we have an app, and I have to tell you about it because maybe it'd be helpful for you or any of your friends. It's called iChill. It has
Okay.
all the different skills. And actually, the reason why we have that iChill app, and we made it in 2010, was because there were a group of women who were at the VA in Sepulveda in Los Angeles. And there was a therapist there named Jan Click who learned the model, and she was teaching it to them. And they said, Jan, we need an app because that's going to help us. So Jan came to me and through, blessings, and I'm going to say a man that I have so much appreciation for, Gary Trudeau, the cartoonist who is very dedicated to veterans, he ended up getting a number of people to donate to the nonprofit, and we were able to make the first app. And it was only in English, but how many languages? It's in English, Spanish, Ukrainian, Arabic, Hebrew, Chinese, Korean, and it soon we'll have Creole and Portuguese, and we're
Wow.
working on Japanese. So why is it in so many languages, right? Because all the skills are the same, whether you are, wherever you are in the world, our nervous system reacts in the same way. So I really love telling, and sharing it with people who've been in the military, because it can be a way. It's not magic, Chuck, it's not magic, but it can turn down the volume of their suffering and help them live life more fully. And that's what veterans have told me.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out.
Good.
So let me ask you, Miss Elaine, given you've been in business for 20 years, you're in all over the world.
Yes.
Is there is there anything that you haven't figured out? Do you have friction points still? Do you
Oh
have
my gosh, of
bottlenecks?
course. I wish I could have it all figured out. No, it's not. Because I think that not, I think that you have to have good people with you. And no, I haven't figured it all out, but I figured some things out. But if you're
Mhm.
an organization that's growing and expanding, which we still are, that means that you always have to look at, how are you organized? Do you need to do some things differently? Do you need to bring on more staff? Do we have the funding to bring in more staff? So we're still a pretty small organization considering how big our reach is. But like for example, we just hired a new person that's like chief of strategic operations. And the reason why we wanted to bring her on board is we wanted her to look at the whole organization and help us understand how we can change things to make things better. And if we need to change things, we need to change them. Now, when you do something like that, it's always, will everybody stay with us? Because they might say, I like the way I do these things and I want to do it this way. But I think part of being a person that deals with what's happening and is adaptable in the present moment is having to look at how the organization changes. Because the organization of 20 years ago, I wouldn't want it to be the same as it is right now. We still have a similar mission and purpose. But how we bring this forward is changing all the time, expanding, growing. People come to me and to Mike Sapp, I handed over the running of the organization to him right before the pandemic, but he and I still work very closely together, is that they come to me and they say, Elaine, I've got this great idea. And I go, well, tell me what it is. And so I'll give you one example. So somebody came to me from Emory University from Atlanta, Georgia, and said, I think your model would work really well in a peer-to-peer program with incarcerated kids in our juvenile justice system. And I said, gosh, you're right. So what did we do? I created a program that was implemented in the state of Georgia in their Department of Juvenile Justice. We did our pilot back in May of last year. We had 9 kids, 9 young men. I don't even know what they did, but we had some great people who taught the model and taught them how to use the model for themselves and how to share it with others. I just was in Atlanta a couple months ago, met with the powers to be in the juvenile justice system. They said, do you know, there's one kid that was even a gang member. And he goes, he's now stopping fights. He's helping people chill out. I chill, right? Get back in their zone again so that they can collaborate and not escalate disagreement, which is always going to happen. So I just had a meeting with them last week. They want to bring it to the girls part of the juvenile justice. So we're going to start that most likely in September. So that's a project that I didn't even conceive of. It was conceived by someone else, but then I wrote the curriculum to make it
Right.
happen. So
Right.
isn't that exciting? But if I just said, oh, we're fine the way we are, we got this model and this is just the way we do it. But when people come to us with ideas, I think if we don't pay attention to them, then we're going to be stagnant as an organization. So I say, yes, we've been there 20 years. And I always say that the models that I created are living models. If they don't change, I would be upset about it, because how can they not change
Right.
when we've got a world that's ever changing? And we
Right.
have people that said, Elaine, have you ever thought of this? I go, gosh, I hadn't thought of that. Boy, that's a good idea. I said, I think we need to add that. So I also think that if you can, within reason, of course, you always have to have somebody who's at the top that says, it's like Harry Truman, the buck stops here. But if you
Mhm.
have collaboration with people that you work with, they're going to bring you ideas that can help expand and grow your organization. And so then I'm going to say, no, I don't have it all figured out, because the organization continues to grow and expand. I can say what I have figured out is that if it's a living, breathing organism that I think the business is, then I hope it's always looking at how we change to make ourselves better, looking at new systems. When you're saying, how can we use AI, for example? Now, I love ChatGPT. And
Mhm.
I have found that I can make slides in a nanosecond now with their help that used to take me so long. And they
Right.
give me great ideas. Do I think, I know a lot of people, AI is controversial. I think it can be an enhancer of what we do as an organization when you have another assistant, right? And I love
Mhm.
the way it learns from you, because it knows me now. And so it
Mhm.
will actually, I'll put something in, like I'll ask them a question. I'm writing this essay and, this is what I've written. And then I'll say, refine it. They'll refine it for me. And then they'll add something. I go, huh, how did they know that? So I didn't always know that they were going to learn from me and then add things. And then I'll look at it. Some things I remove, some things like, hey, that's a good thing to add. I even want to expand on it. But isn't that a wonderful way?
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
it's like you have a personal editor with you
Mhm.
24/7. So to me, AI can be an enhancer, and it doesn't have to be something that detracts from the creativity of what I do as a human being. I think it can actually enhance your creativity.
Yeah. That's my view as well.
Is that your view as well? Yeah.
Yeah, it's, not to replace people. You need a person with a brain
No.
to make decisions and think,
Yes, of
but
course. Of course.
if it's leveraged properly, right, it reduces friction. It makes it take less time to do the things that, repetitive tasks, especially, a thinking partner, not somebody to replace.
I love that thinking partner, because like a couple months ago, we wanted to hire a new position. So I just put in the ingredients. I said, I'd like you to write a job description. These are the qualifications, and this is the characteristics what I'd like to have in the. Oh my God, it saves so much time.
Yeah.
And they wrote a beautiful job description. I tweaked it a little bit, but not much. But that to me is like having a thinking partner along with you. It's
Right.
not a replacement for me.
No.
It makes my job simpler with things I don't have to spend hours on that are so because is it fun to, you know, write a job description? It's not fun for me.
Especially
But
sitting there in front of a blank page, right? Because you got to write
exactly.
it and adjust it and
Exactly.
redo it.
Exactly. So I think that part of being a good leader too is embracing technology. I mean, obviously there's limitations and we have to have guardrails, of course, because I wouldn't
Hmm.
want people saying, "Oh, I'm just going to create something and just say, Chat GPT, create my book." Now that to me is not something I would want them it to
Hmm.
do or to do with someone who's in our organization because I want the creativity of a human, but
Hmm.
why not use these other kinds of assists that helpers? When I wrote my first book in 2014, I hired my personal editor because I wanted to have someone who worked with me separately from the editor from the publisher. So, and I think now I probably wouldn't need to do that in the same way because I think that editor would be ChatGPT, if that makes sense. But
Right.
does it mean that I wouldn't still hire that person to help me because I'd want her brain to help me
Hmm.
look at what I've created to see what she thinks about it? Because to me, it would just take out a certain amount of the tediousness of it and use the creativity that I know that she has that can look at like a chapter and say, Elaine, have you thought of da 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 da? So because I know people are worried about people losing their jobs. To me, it's not a replacement. It's like you said, it's like a thinking partner.
Right. Right. So, Miss Elaine, what would be if you had a magic wand and there was one thing that you could magically wave over your business? Is there one thing that you would change? What would that one thing, what would that look like?
Well, well, I mean, this has to do. I would like to have someone who might be a very wealthy person saying, "We are going to give you $1 million,
I would like
and
that too.
yes, you were going to give you $1 million, and this is for your humanitarian programs."
Okay.
Because when people come to me, like I'll give you Ukraine as an example. So I had a meeting scheduled with them 4 years ago on the 22nd of February when the war started. The
Mm-hmm.
war wasn't, we didn't even know the war was going to start, but we were going to be doing a project together. We met anyway. And in that moment, we pivoted. And I said,
Hmm.
"What do you need?" And they said, "We will need you, if you can, have a drop in support center for our teachers. And we'll have the translators there." So for the first 90 days of the war, every morning at 6 o'clock, I was on a call with people in Ukraine. I could hear bombs dropping.
Oh, wow.
But I could be with them and they go, "Oh, we got to get off right now, but we'll be back." So after the bombs left, there they were again. I mean, my translator to me is a saint, but I didn't have any, there wasn't any funding for that project. We got some funding later for that
Mhm.
project, but it wasn't there to begin with. So then we're using, our talent within the organization. We're pivoting from other projects that also didn't stop going on. But if we would have had, if it makes
Mhm.
it easier to respond to the kind of humanitarian projects. And so a good example is Los Angeles. We're devastated still. I live in Claremont and it's about 20 minutes away from Altadena. And so we're all like fire affected, even if we didn't lose our houses, right? And
Mhm.
we've been working very actively as an organization because I'm an Angelino now, right? Even though I grew up in San Jose, right, area, that, how can we help our community? Well, when we're doing, like we were asked by LA County Parks and Rec to do something for all, oh my God, Chuck, they were amazing young people. They staffed the shelters when the fires first happened. And these were kids that were like lifeguards. They were like soccer coaches. And then they did care camps for the kids. So
Mhm.
LA County Parks and Rec came to us because they kind of know who we are now and said, "Can you do something for them? We're worried that they could have been traumatized, but we want to do something that's nourishing for them in your strength based approach."
Mhm.
So we created a whole program for them. They told us it was going to be like 300, I think 600. I mean, it was like so many people came and we did such a sweet offering. Now, we didn't say, "Oh, can you pay us for that?" Of course, I would never ask people in that degree of trauma to do that. We just did it. So we did it and we got our volunteers out there and we just I created a whole program for that. We ended up doing it for LA City Parks and Rec because it was so successful. Oh, but what if I had that endowment? I could give a little bit of money to people to help us with things, right? That would be
Yeah.
nice. So if I had a magic wand, I would love that, Chuck.
So, do you do fundraising now, or are you typically
Yes.
revenue driven? What kind of
Okay,
fundraising?
yeah, and this is a very good question. So I am very happy to say that when I first started in thinking about how I was funding the organization, we have these trainings that we can do for anybody. So then I hardly paid myself anything in the beginning. And so when people started helping us, and they were initially all independent contractors, we didn't have employees. I could pay them some that was reasonable, and then I could start putting money in the general fund. That
Hmm.
was essential in the beginning because those were the operating costs. And
Hmm.
then as we grew and more people wanted what we had to offer, then, we said, oh, we're going to need some employees. We're going to need to structure the business differently. But we always have had X amount of money from our trainings that go to the general fund. So as a small nonprofit, we've got a few $100,000 in a bank account that is
Yeah.
bearing interest. That is a really good thing. I think
Right.
we probably have enough money in there. I don't know exactly how much is in there now because I don't watch it as carefully as I used to because we have an ED that does that now. I used to do it. But I think we have enough for the operating costs for a year. Isn't that something? Now,
Yes.
but that's not enough.
No.
So we recently, in the last year, hired a director of philanthropy because what we knew we needed to do is exactly the answer to your question. We needed to go after more grants, which I never had the time to do. I think I'd gone after one, we got it, but I mean, it's like if you're running an organization and you're a small business, when do you have the time to do these other things? You can hire
Never.
independent contractors, or you can say, oh, we can hire this person, and their only job is to look for grants that we can apply for.
Hmm.
And we did, and she was very helpful with one, and we all collaborated in terms of putting it together. But we did get $250,000 is the first time we ever got that chunk of change. But we
Hmm.
had to use it from June of 2025 to December 31st. And it was only for the well being and bringing what we do in the world to the survivors of the fires in Altadena and the Palisades. And we did. I have never worked harder in my life. I took 4 weeks off in January because I was so tired. I'm getting old, Chuck. We did pivot and we were able to do it. And then we were able to pay people to come. We
Hmm.
were able to pay the independent contractors and the volunteers some. Some of them were from Altadena or the
Nice.
Palisades area. So we were actually able to help them and pay
Right.
them a little bit, right? Which is so great. But everything went for the benefit of the survivors. And that's what we were called to do. So I think that's one example of that you can do this, but you have to have somebody dedicated to looking for when the grant's out there. And every grant, you don't get every grant, right?
Right.
We partner with other organizations as well to write grants, and we've done that. And so sometimes we'll get a percentage of something. But I think that for a viable nonprofit, in my estimation, you really need to not only, because many nonprofits just rely on grants,
I
governmental
think
funding.
relying on any one source of income, it doesn't
It's
matter if you're
not
a person or a business, it's
not
not a
good.
great plan.
And you see that with, the changes in the government over the last year, that many things that have been traditionally in the social services, the Doge thing cut some of those things out. And so then you lost funding sources. And so then the funding sources aren't the same. And we've had that affect some of our partners where we've said, oh, they just can't, we have to cancel the training with you all because they've taken all our money away. And that's happened a number of times. It's also happened internationally because we work not just in the United States, but it's happened. The tragedy to me is USAID, because USAID has been such an important thing internationally in terms of saving people's lives and actually having a more steady global economy
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
stability. And seeing the stuff that's happened with USAID to me is pretty tragic. But you have to figure out what are you going to do instead. So we had a project with the Democratic Republic of the Congo who were going to fund us here in the States, right, to do a training online, and then they lost their USAID funding. And so then, they said, I guess we can't go forward. But do you think we didn't do it, Chuck? What do you think? We did it anyway. We did it anyway. So we were able to do that as a nonprofit, but not every organization can do that. But to me, how could I not do it when
Right.
I knew that it was going to mitigate the suffering of the people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo? That they work with young women and men, children that have been sexually assaulted and trafficked, right?
Right.
So it's like, how can you not help them? And you're a veteran, you've been in other countries. We
Hmm.
get spoiled in the US thinking that we
We
just
do.
have one way of being, which we know is
Not the
not
same
the
for everybody.
it's not the same for everybody. So I'm proud that we do that, but I think we're working more steadily to have, an endowment so that that is always there. I think we're going to have it because I think more and more people know about us, and we know that some people have put us in their will, for example. And
Hmm.
so that will provide us with some stability in the future. And we're
Okay.
hopefully getting that right now as well. and we have applied for more money regarding helping, our people in Los Angeles. But, that doesn't mean we're going to stop doing it. Like I'm going out to one of the areas on Saturday and going to help with a workshop and do some other things. There's no funding connected to it. But I would do it anyway. So I guess that's the other part about it. Oh my gosh, how crazy am I? I would do it anyway.
I mean, that's what they say, though, right? Find something you would do for free, do it really well, and money is a byproduct.
And I do get paid. I do have a salary. So, I love that I have a salary and I work hard. And so I don't mind going out there and doing that, even though there's no funding source coming from that particular project now.
Right. And I'm just curious, would you be at all interested in looking at alternative sources of funding, kind of
Of
those
course,
projects,
yes,
besides
of
just
course.
grants or whatever?
Well, of course, of course, of course.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I do appreciate your time on here today, and I don't want to take up too much more of it. But Miss Elaine, your one piece of advice over 20 years in business, you do great work all around the world. You're in multiple different countries. You've, written a book that's in many languages. People could work their
Mm.
whole life and hope for a fraction of your success.
Well, it's been a humble journey. It's been so full of love and kindness and generosity and struggle.
And struggle. What's your biggest piece of advice, knowing all of that?
Okay, adversity is not destiny. And the second one is what else is true? Is
What
yeah, there
else?
could be suffering now, but what else can be true about your journey that might give you the strength or the courage to do something in a different way, even when you're in the midst of great suffering?
Well, thank you, Miss Elaine. Thank you for joining
Well,
my
you're welcome.
podcast. Thank you for your
Yes,
time.
and please feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Yes, ma'am. Have an
It
amazing
was
day.
really great to meet another person from San Jose. And you got there
Of course.
in a very interesting way too. For the love of a woman, what a good way to go.
The love of a woman.
Yes, there you go. Okay,
Okay.
thank you, thank you, thank you.